episode of DRL is brought to you by Hella Cocktail Company. At this point in the quarantine, you've probably become a teacher, a chef, a housekeeper, a hairdresser, a barista, a trainer, and so much more. But when it's time to unwind from all that, Hella Cocktail Company can turn you into a bartender, a great one. Hella Cocktail Company features premium bitters and soda, and cocktail mixes. My favorite is the spicy margarita mix. I use it to make chili watermelon margaritas, and I just add tequila, some watermelon juice, and then a few dashes of the smoked chili bitters. It's so good. Hella Bitters and Soda is now available at Whole Foods, or you can use code DRL online at hellacocktail.co for free shipping. Hello, my lovely listeners. Welcome back to another episode of DRL, where we're talking everything dating, relationships, and love. I'm your host, Tennesha Wood. So I turned 36 like 2 months ago. And ever since then, for whatever reason, 36 is that age for me anyway, where I started thinking a lot about my biological clock. I know I probably should have been thinking about this at 30, but 36 is when it hit me. And I'm not really actually sure if I want kids of my own. And I go back and forth with this. And I'm just trying to think about what all the options are and if I should be, moving towards those options, if I should just sit on it a little bit longer. So today I have with me 3 beautiful ladies that have chosen to freeze their eggs. So I want to hear more about their journey and how they did it and how they're feeling about it and why they did it. So I want to introduce Nubia and Lauren and Azella. Hi, ladies.
Hi.
How are you guys doing?
Good.
They all live in the Bay. How's the Bay right now?
In these uncertain times.
In these Corona times. The sun just came out, so I'm happy.
The sun just came out.
You're like, you mean how are my 4 walls?
Right. I haven't left in like 3.5 weeks.
So Nubia, why don't we start with you? Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you?
First of all, thank you, Tennesha, for having us. I'm so excited. It's been a long time coming for me to be on your show.
You're one of those guests that I'm like, I've been trying to get you on for years.
So shout out to Elisha and Lauren and Margaret, who have all came on, who are all part of our amazing circle of friends. Yeah, anyways, really excited to be here. I've done 2 cycles of egg freezing, and I did my first cycle when I was 37 and just completed my last cycle. I'm 38 and did it right at the beginning of Rona. I've always known that I wanted to be a mom, and things just haven't worked in the timing that I sort of thought, and freezing my eggs was just a way for me to think about a long-term strategy. And I'm so fortunate to work for a company that covers that expense. And so it was a wonderful option for me, where I didn't have to really think too much about the financial implications, because I know that that is really big. So for me, it was just about wanting to have the option. And the way that I talked to my doctor about it was that this is an option for like my second child. Not that I can't have children naturally, but just as a backup.
Hi, Azella.
Hey.
How are you doing? So tell us about you.
I am from Alaska, made my way down here through a whole bunch of different countries and cities, and ended up working for a tech company as well when I froze my eggs, and they also paid for it as part of their benefits package. I froze my eggs at 35, and I think I'm probably a little different than most women who do this. I don't want kids. I've never wanted kids.
So why do it?
I'm a Gemini, and optionality is really big. At the time when I froze them, I was 35, I was single, I was living in the Bay, which is like the worst place to date possibly ever that I've ever been. And I've traveled the world extensively. And so I was like, I don't know if I'm ever going to find a man. I want to marry a Black man. I don't know many Black men that don't want kids. So if and when that happens, I might be 40, I might be 45, who knows? And he wants kids. Like, I might just throw my hands up and be like, fine, we can raise some kids. And so.
And you're in a relationship currently?
We've been together for about 18 months, still waiting to see whether or not he really, really wants kids or whether it's like a maybe thing. So
Hey, Lauren.
Hi.
You're engaged, right?
It is relatively recent. I, like Azella, found love in the Bay with a Black man. So
Fair point.
before she just puts all that out there, like it's impossible. We are both unicorns, maybe in this situation. But yes, I am engaged. My fiance and I have actually, we've only been together like maybe a little less than a year and a half. But when you know, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're in your mid to late 30s, you're like, well, you're either it or you're not. So let's do it. And we decided to do it. So we pre-Rona had decided to get married this October, and we will wait to see if we still get to execute on our plans. I froze my eggs. I did one cycle at age 34 and really was kind of inspired by friends like Azella, who told me about what the process was like and what it meant for them. And at the time that I decided to do it, I was single and was looking toward a path of continued singledom and was like, well, at this rate, like it might just be me. So let me try to create some insurance for myself, depending on what future my life might take, or when I decide, or when I do finally find somebody, depending on my age, maybe that is something that we're going to want to do naturally, and maybe the egg freezing will help us. I had in mind that my mom went through menopause relatively early. So I saw myself kind of creeping toward that age where it became really difficult for her. And then I work in social services, I work in local government. And so they do not pay for any of this. They don't even pay for your blood work. So I even have to come out of pocket just, to get kind of my blood work tested. But at the time, I had a very, very beloved uncle who passed, and he didn't have children, and I inherited some money, and I thought that this would be a way to reinvest kind of family legacy money into a potential future. So that is where I cobbled together money. And we can talk about later. I hustled for some of the costs.
So upset that I hadn't saved the drugs because I thought you couldn't give them away, and I just had extras. I felt so bad when you were like, "Anybody have any extra?"
Oh, I hustled, and people, wonderful shepherds like Nubia and Azella and other friends who had been on this journey were able to help me offset some of the costs so that I could get it done. So,
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's awesome. But I also found myself in a relationship as I was going through this, and sort of the awkwardness of something I had decided unilaterally, but that could have implications for our collective future.
So can you guys walk me through the process? Like, how does it work? How do you get your eggs frozen?
A huge caveat that none of us are medical experts in this.
Huge. So I remember going at the very beginning, and they have you go to a session before you can even start anything, where they explain it all out. They give you handouts, they give you a drawing. And I remember sitting there as the only single person in a room full of couples. And I have never felt so single in my life as embarking upon this journey that is very scary. And they show it on movies and TV shows like Being Mary Jane and like all this stuff. And so I was slightly terrified. And I was afraid that all the estrogen shots that I had to give myself were going to make me super hormonal, super sad, super crazy, super all the things. And I was going to have to deal with this all by myself. Basically, you go in, they do some tests to see how many follicles you have, an ultrasound, I think, intravaginal ultrasound. There was a lot of those.
What are follicles?
then,
I mean, I'm just thinking like hair follicles, but what do they mean by follicles?
Follicles are essentially the potential of eggs that could grow off your ovaries. They use that as like a predictor of how many eggs you might be able to cultivate and then ultimately extract. And so this intravaginal ultrasound takes a look at what your follicle count is. But then there are lots of things that follow.
They stick a rod up your vagina that has like a 360 view finder on it. And they kind of like move it around in there so they can like see all the different sides, because you have two sides that have follicles. And then depending on how many follicles you have, they come out and are like, hey, I think they said most people have like 14 or 15 total, something like that. And so then they give you a cocktail of shots, and you have to come. What they don't tell you is that you have to come in at like 7 a.m. every morning for like 2 weeks almost to the same place to get an intravaginal ultrasound, and every now and then a blood draw. And so they test to see where your estrogen levels are. They then, based off of that, give you a personalized cocktail of 2 or 3 different drug shots that you have to give yourself at the same time every day. And then every 2 days after you start, they have you come in to do another ultrasound to see how many eggs you've grown and then how big they are. Because I didn't know that you actually spit out like all the eggs for all the follicles that you have, and then your hormones actually pick one egg to get them all, like one ring to rule them all. And all the hormones go to that one egg and all the other ones die off. And
I
so
had
that
no
egg
idea.
gets hormonized. I don't know what the word is. And that's the one that travels down your fallopian tubes to possibly meet up with a sperm. But all the other eggs were possible, but they died off because they didn't get hormone. And so this time, instead of all the eggs dying off, they actually give you enough estrogen and stuff to keep them all alive so that they can all get taken out at the end. And so that's what they're doing. And then after every couple of days, you go in for about 10 days to 14 days, depending. And when your eggs get big enough, then, and they're mature enough for them to pull out, they give you a quote unquote trigger shot instead of the 2 or 3 shots you've been taking every night. And that trigger shot kind of like says, release. And then all the eggs are available for you to then come in, go under, have them suction them out, and then you go home.
When you had to take those shots, did you feel extra emotional or all the things that you thought you would beforehand?
So not me personally. Ironically, I have like twice as many follicles as an average woman. And so they had to give me like a very low dose of estrogen to get my eggs going or my follicles going. And so I actually had the opposite effect where I was just like on an estrogen high, like life was better. My skin was glowing. Everything was wonderful. I was happy. The only thing was that
I feel like I want this shot now.
Right.
Everything is amazing.
So I didn't.
Animals were talking to you, you know.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
Bambi rolled up on you.
Exactly.
I think I had the opposite experience as you, right? So I actually had a lower ovarian reserve, and I did this cycle twice to get estimated amount that you need or whatever. So I was on quite a bit of shots. At one point I was on 3 shots a day.
Are these needle shots you're giving yourself?
Yeah. And I don't know about you guys, but for me, the shots actually weren't as bad as it sounds. The harder part for me was just even long before the shots, just like everything leading up to the appointment, knowing that this is something that I'm going to do.
Yeah.
You know, kind of recognizing I think I was 36, turning 37, that like I'm in this place where I don't have a partner, but this is something that I want, and like getting the courage to do that, knowing that I don't know what the outcome is. That was the harder part. And then once I did it, and I think Azella and I had the same doctor. She was an incredible
amazing facility in Oakland.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
Yeah, who was just so supportive and kind. And so that, for me, that was the harder part. Once I was on the medications and doing the shots, I actually felt really empowered. And I felt like, oh, I'm doing this. And I had so many other friends like Azella and other folks that had done it before. I felt like, okay, this is something I can do. And I don't know what's going to come of this, but I know that I'm like, you know, in my head, preparing myself for what I want. Now, I will say afterwards, there's a point where you do feel kind of bloated, you know, because these follicles and eggs are growing in you. So towards the end, I definitely felt super bloated. And for me, because I have a lower reserve, I knew that I would have to do this again. And that was hard to fathom because I've had a lot of friends who did it and they were sort of one and done, and it was like this easy thing. And I also have fibroids, and that adds a little complications for the ultrasounds. But then afterwards, I would say like, that's when I really felt emotional. Once the eggs were extracted and you go through this process and you've been injecting yourself for 2.5 weeks with all these hormones. And all of a sudden I'm crying on BART one day, which is our like training system. I'm like, okay, this is a lot. This is a lot, but it's not a hard process. For me, it was hard working up to it, but once you're in it, you are perfectly equipped to handle it and do it.
Now, Nubia, I know that you were dating during this process. Did you tell people that you were dating about the fact that you were going through this?
The first round, I did not. What's interesting about going through the egg freezing process, you have to be home at a certain time to always administer the shots around the same time. So I would like plan these dates and then make sure I could like get home in time. But one date like ran long, and then I was like, okay, let me like just like shift this window just a little bit. And then come to find out he didn't want children. And I was like, what the hell am I doing here?
I shifted my window for you.
You told me that at the beginning.
Right. The second round, I will say, was interesting because I was dating someone and he definitely wanted children. And so that was easy to explain, and did shots in front of him and everything. So it was totally fine.
Wow. Awesome. How about you, Lauren? Like, how was the initial process for you?
You probably have about a month where you were like in the egg freezing world. They really need to track your periods. So they put you on a really intense birth control to get you on a cycle that they can calendar out. And that was when I first started to feel like, okay, I'm doing some weird things to my body, because I felt like they were giving me this birth control on steroids, which is a ton of hormones. Everything's really calculated and customized. So, you go in there and, they meet you and it's like, hi, welcome to spring fertility, and everything's white. And even the receptionist is like, oh, your hair looks so beautiful today. I'm like, oh, thank you.
This seems so zen. It seems like a spa.
It's like Stepford Zen. It's totally weird, but I'm here for it, right? I'm like, if I'm going to pay you this much money, I expect the free infused water. I'm going to drink all the tea.
I want my cucumber water.
Exactly. I want my cucumber water. I'm going to pocket a Perrier. And the first time I had to figure out how to administer a shot for myself was anxiety building.
Is that scary, having to give yourself a shot? Like, to me, I'm like, I could barely give myself eye drops.
The first time.
Yeah, the first time for sure. Well, because you just know how unqualified you are to do this, right? I've watched too much Grey's Anatomy. I've watched too much, I'm like, what if this hits my hepatic vein and I sever,
all I can hear is she needs to be intubated.
Exactly. So in my brain, I'm like, there are so many ways I can do this wrong, right? Like, what if there's an air bubble in here and I have a stroke? And because I have no idea, because as Nubia said, I am not a medical professional and I have no idea. So luckily, they give you like a training video and you watch it 17 times and then you finally stick yourself. And then by the end, you are like a pro. By the end, you're ready to like draw blood from the person on the street.
Girl, yes.
Do you need some tests done? I got you. Come on over.
Yeah. But next time I'm on a plane, if someone's like, is there a doctor? I'll be like, I'm not a doctor, but I have frozen my eggs. So how can I assist? But I definitely felt the bloating. I definitely felt like, it just felt like I was on my period for a very long time, which was just uncomfortable and made me a little more irritable and a little more emotional. So it wasn't extreme. It was definitely uncomfortable. And by the very end, I know we've mentioned these follicles. You're like growing all these follicles and your ovaries are expanding and you can't actually see it, but psychologically you can feel it. For me, the scariest part was I had never been put under before, and they put you under when they're going to extract the eggs. And that was where the height of my anxiety was.
So you were single, Lauren, when you did it.
I was single when I decided to do it. Let's say I decided to do it like November 2018 or something, and then scoped it out for April 2019. And I met my significant other in December. So like it just, the mental wheels were turning and I was setting up appointments and things like that, but it was still in a place where like, this is my boyfriend of 3 months. Like, it's not a thing we're doing together. Like, I was still on track to do my thing.
Did you have the conversation with him pretty early about the fact that you were doing it?
I did. And one thing that stuck out to me was I told him about it. And I had different people in my life who were like, what does he think? And I was like, I don't know. I was like, I didn't ask for an opinion. I told him about it.
Right.
So there was an interesting like wake up call, because as I was still in this new relationship where no, we weren't really making decisions, especially at this magnitude, we're still negotiating like, how many nights do you sleep over? And like, that kind of stuff. So I sort of told him about it. And I think because of my delivery, he was kind of like, okay. And then I thought maybe I should ask his opinion. He could sense that this was something that like I was doing for myself. And so he just kind of like laid off. But he was generally supportive. I think one thing that was challenging was he was traveling internationally during this time with the shots. And so it was a time where I might have liked having like a partner there to support me, but it wasn't an us journey. It wasn't an us decision. We weren't doing it together. And so the fact that he wasn't physically in the country while it was happening, I was like, well, yeah, Lauren, this is your project. You started this project. You get to finish it. Yeah.
How much does this cost?
It's about $15,000. About 9 of that is the procedure itself. Like the very first consultation where you first come in, it's like $500 just to come in and introduce yourself and have them be like,
I'd like some cucumber water.
exactly, which is why I pocketed so much of it. I was like, this meeting cost me $450. And things like blood work, if I have to pay out of pocket, which I did, I paid for everything out of pocket, that totals about $1,000. And then the meds come to about $4,500 to $5,000.
So when each of you did this, you were single. Were you thinking, what if I don't meet the person? Will I go through this alone? Like, I mean, by this, I mean having a child. And is that a possibility that you all have thought of and willing to do if it doesn't happen the way you want it to?
Like, would we be a single mom by choice?
Yeah. Nubia, you always wanted kids. So is that something that you've thought about and sort of willing to go the whole way?
I have some amazing friends who have done that, and I'm so inspired by them, but that didn't motivate me for this. I still have hope that I will meet someone and we will create a beautiful family together. The place that I'm in now is more that I've always wanted to be a mother, and I'm realizing that to be a mom, there's lots of ways to do that. You don't necessarily have to have your own children for that. And so I would, of course, love to bring a child into this world with my partner. But if that, for whatever reason, doesn't transpire, then I would totally be open to adoption. But I don't think that I would, and I don't know, but that wasn't motivating me to do this.
How about you, Lauren? Was that a factor?
It was actually a factor for me. I think because I was at a place where I was like, anything could happen. And I had been sort of, interviewing so many of my friends who were partnered, unpartnered, had children, were struggling to have children. I was thinking anything is possible. If I turn around and I'm 42 and I'm unmarried and unpartnered and all I really want in this entire world is a biological child, like, I think I will be so insanely grateful and happy that I froze my eggs at 34, because I, like anybody else, have potential to have fertility issues. And so if I have an opportunity to get ahead of it, I'm going to do that, because the emotional labor of wanting to have a child at any time when it's hard is so fierce and overwhelming. And I've just seen so many powerful people go through it. But similar to Nubia, like, I thought, I would like to be a mother. That's always been in my plan. And I don't know when I'm going to get to a place where I could do that sort of emotionally or financially on my own. And I also very much think that the option of adoption is something I would welcome. But I just kind of looked at the landscape of knowing that there are all possibilities. And there's a chance that the only thing I ever want in this world is to give birth to a child, and it's hard. And so how can I set myself up for a little more insurance?
So did this take any pressure off of dating? Like, did you then feel like, I don't have to meet the one tomorrow, so like, I'm good. I'll still have that mother piece, so I don't have to rush the process of trying to meet somebody? It did for you, Azella?
Yeah. It's already hard enough going into dating as a Black person who's like, I don't really want kids. Like, do you want kids? Are you open to not possibly having kids? Like, where are you on the spectrum? And so once I froze my eggs, I was like, like, I don't have to ask this question anymore. Even if my boyfriend decided he wanted kids and we've already talked about this, I'm like, we're getting a surrogate. I'm not pushing anything out of the vagina. Like, the eggs are there, your sperm is there. Let's fertilize them. If we get married, we can fertilize half of them, be done with it, have embryos, and then somebody can take care of that stuff. And so, like, I think for me, when it went to dating, I was just like, no, I don't have to ask the question. I don't have to think about it anymore, because age isn't as big of a factor. Like, I could take my time. I could say no to you because you want kids, and I could say yes to the next person that does, or vice versa. Like, it just made everything a little less stressful that way for me.
Did you tell guys prior to that, like, I don't want kids, when you were dating, and how did they react?
Most men assume that I do want kids because I'm a woman. I just don't know my own mind enough, and I will want their kids. I just haven't met the man that I wanted kids with. And so my boyfriend from a while ago, he actually, in one of our not better moments, told me that I had a hole in my heart, and that I was extremely selfish. Like, what kind of person doesn't want kids? Like, you must have something missing in your heart. The boyfriend before that said that I would come around and I was going to want his kids once I hit 30, once my clock started ticking. And so, Yeah, men generally don't believe you. And if they do believe you, many of them will think that there's something wrong with you. Like you must have had trauma in your past. There has to be a reason why you don't want children, because it's not human, or it's not feminine, or it's not normal. And so when I met my current boyfriend, and he was like, got it. Like, that's interesting. Okay. And I was like, do you want kids? And he was like, I mean, I always thought I would, but it's not lost on me that God has seen fit for me to fall in love with a person that doesn't. And so like, I'm going to think about it. And I was like, all right, cool. And there's just something about the fact that he's not telling me there's something wrong with me, or that he's not saying like, you have to, that then makes my contrarian self be like, oh, well, I mean, I guess maybe I could think about it. It's not like a thing. So, I mean, like I said, I'm a Gemini. And so, yeah.
So you are open if you guys do stay together and he does decide at some point that this might be the route for him, children.
I am open. I am crossing my fingers that he is going to see through because he's younger than me. And so many of my friends are now having babies in the 0 to 5 age range, and his friends aren't yet. And so he's seeing, when we visit my friends, the lack of sleep, the impact it has on relationships, the impact it has on your ability to travel, to like just have your own life, like all of those things. And so I'm hoping that he will come to the conclusion that he would rather just take in wards that are more grown. Like I have no problem raising children. I just really don't want the sleepless nights from like 0 to 8. And so if I
come at me when you're 9.
Yeah, exact. Holler at me when we can have a conversation. Like I can do that. So, but no, if he came to me and was just like, I will not be fulfilled as a human if I can't have a child of my own flesh and blood. Like, I'm like, all right, like we'll figure it out. But I'm really hoping he doesn't say that.
Now, I'm also at that same place where most of my friends do have kids in that, 1 to 5 range. And I have been somewhat deterred by seeing their lives and how little time they have for themselves, right? And so I sometimes look at that and I'm like, I don't know that I can handle that. Like, I don't know that 24/7 I want to be responsible for another human.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is for you and Nubia and Lauren. You are probably in the same phase where a lot of your friends have kids. You're seeing them being tired and sort of having to give up a lot of other things that they were doing maybe even with you before. Has that deterred you at all or made you rethink the decision to have kids?
It's such an interesting question because I have friends who make it look so easy. And then I have friends who make it look really hard. And,
Same.
and for friends that make it look really easy, I'm like, damn, I wish I had kids so that all our kids could play together. We could have a cute, lovely community of like all these lovely children. And that's probably what's more top of mind. Like for me, I look forward to that. I know it's hard and I know it's not easy, especially in Rona when you're like homeschooling and doing all the things. But I'm probably on the opposite end where I find it really exciting and just look forward to loving and learning more about myself as a parent through a kid. But I know that it's hard. And I think the friends that make it look easy, what they do that's really interesting for me is that they're really transparent about how hard it is, but they're also really honest about the things that they still enjoy doing. And when I think about like the type of parent I want to be, I don't want to completely lose sight of all the things that I love to do. And they are also incredibly transparent about how hard it is, but also like still in tune with what they love. And that's just what I want to be.
That is beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Like I see it, but I'm still willing to go through it. Like I still want that.
So, yeah, I still want that. But you know what makes it really interesting is, so I'm single right now, but the first cycle that I did it, and again, I've done it twice, and I will say like everybody's body is so different. I have friends that have done it one and done. I've had friends that have done it 4 times. Everyone has a different journey, but it didn't alleviate the pressure for me. It actually, in some weird ways, like amplified it, but also just like reminded me of what I really want in a partner. because I went through this and it was fine, but it made me realize that this is actually something really important that I want. And I don't know that I could be with someone who wasn't flexible, at least to what I am interested in for the future. And so it didn't alleviate the pressure.
So then in some ways when you were dating, were you seeing what they were like as a father? Like, is that the perspective that you were coming at it from? I was like, well, they're cool, but would they be a great father?
Maybe subconsciously, but I think I was kind of like that from jump, honestly. Not gonna lie. I think I've always kind of been like that. Someone once told me that you should date someone who you'd want your son to be like. And so I've always thought about like, oh, would I want a son like that? Like, and then what was their father like or whatever?
Would I be proud to be your mama?
Yeah, right. But no, I mean, I think like, I'm just drawn to people that are like more community oriented, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to be a parent, but you are like drawn to people and want to connect and have meaningful connections. And so I have found that most of the men that I've dated are just super like paternal in their own way.
How about you, Lauren? Was that a factor for you?
In some ways, freezing my eggs alleviated some of the pressure of having to hurry into having children. But at the same time, like regardless of whether or not I've frozen my eggs, raising 0 to 5 looks exhausting. And so my fiance and I have been talking about it, and we're both in our, mid to late 30s, and like sleep is a beautiful
talk about it. It is everything. Over 30, sleep is everything. And that is the key thing that I am looking at. And I'm like, you never sleep in again. There are no Saturdays. There are no Sundays. There's no more sleep.
No, you don't have to, you're not allowed to like have a stomach ache and just like take an afternoon to watch television. You don't get to just like take a nap. You always have to clean things up after people and make sure people are fed and stuff like that. So anyway, again, it's
sort of putting me to the other side again. I'm like, yep, true. Yep, she said it.
The funny, weird part of it is like, but at the end of the day, we know that big picture, this is something that we want. And so like in a much less beautiful and eloquent way than Nubia said, like, we're going to do it anyway. I was like, man, Nubia, that's so romantic. She's like, even though I see this hardship, I just look forward to become the parent. And I'm like, even though we're old and we like our naps and we're going to hate these kids, we're going to have kids anyway.
Particularly right now during this time of Corona. Like it's hard, just me and my boyfriend in this house, it's like, oh my God, I need a break. We need to do this. We need to do that. And I think I would go somewhat crazy.
You would.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And I think it's funny because what Rona has done for me was really made me think deeply about these things, and like not in a casual way anymore, but really like, if this is the new world, is that something I could actually handle? And knowing myself and just how I like my peace and my quiet time and my alone time and all the things that I need for me to make me happy, is this really something that's for me? And I do think that the best parents are the ones that are selfless, right? Like they are the ones that are like, it's not about me. And I just don't know that I'm willing to give that up yet.
I feel like the best parents are actually the ones that are able to find that balance of like, I'm going to be in for you, but I'm also going to maintain my identity and like the shit I love to do.
Right.
And it's hard and it's rare, but like, to me, you got to be the best version of yourself before you can do that for your children. Like you got to put on your own, what's it called when you're on the airplane and like
secure your own mask first.
You got to secure your own mask. It's about being selfless. Yeah. And like in sleep and in caring, but it's also like about like setting such clear boundaries about like, I'm going to maintain this side of my identity. If it's important for me to go out to have dinner with my friends once a month, I'm going to do that. If I need to like go to a concert every other month, I'm going to do that. I'm going to get a babysitter. It might take more work, but I think that like the friends that I've seen that have like done this well, they haven't lost sight of who they are. They've just made those boundaries like so much more clear.
And it seems so hard to do though, to not lose sight of it. The most annoying thing for me sometimes is when I go on Instagram and I see some bios and the bio will literally say like Johnny's mom, Sarah's mom. And I'm like, oh my God, like it becomes the entire identity. And I'm scared that that might be something that might happen to me where I sort of lose touch with all the other things that I am because this thing that's directly in front of me on a daily basis and can't actually survive without me seems so much more important than like, well, I need to go to brunch with my friends. It's like, well, here's Johnny needing everything that Johnny needs again. So I guess I'm like a very black and white, this or that. And the gray area is so hard for me. That's why I think like the balance for me would be really, really tough.
I was talking to my boyfriend about this, and he has family members that are in a different socioeconomic situation than a lot of us. And he was like, I have seen a bunch of my family members and extended people have babies at young ages and deal with it and keep it moving. And I see some of your friends and it seems like they struggle. Like I'm hearing and I'm seeing the 0 to 5. It's tough. And he's like, it seems like your friend group isn't used to taking L's. When they put their energy and effort into something, they're used to it working. If you try hard enough, you push hard enough, if I want something bad enough, I'm going to make this happen. And he's like, I think there is a mental difference between my friends and my people that I know from that life, where life just hands them L's even when they try. And so because they've had to deal with that over and over and over and just keep moving, kids are like perpetual losses. I want you to wear your clothes normal. You're not. I want your hair to look decent when we go outside and you're not ashy. You won't listen. I want you not to have a meltdown when we go to the grocery store. It's not happening. It's a constant set of losses where you're just giving in and giving up and giving to God. And we are not as well equipped, it seems, mentally to just let it go and lose. And I wonder if that has something to do with it. We're not well equipped to say like, I need my Zen quiet space. I'm going to take a weekend just to self-care. Like other people in different economic groups can't just take a weekend to self-care. And so they just push through and figure it out. And so I almost wonder if I'm just not well equipped to handle the L's that come with kids.
That's fascinating. But also we have resources or, I mean, just we on this call happen to have resources to get assistance with that. But I think that's a really poignant point. I think that's a really strong point that folks really just like, this is the necessity of it. And I've had the luxury and privilege of leading a pretty individualistic, selfish life for the most part. And clearly, even in my partnership, I'm like incrementally being more of a we, like, oh yeah, I guess we should decide the future of our offspring as opposed to me. I've been studying all my friends with all their children in the 0 to 5. And I don't want to underestimate what like hormones do to you. People fall in love with these children. And so I see the most driven, the most ambitious, the most powerful, successful, professional women who are like, I'm dropping to part-time. I want to be home for this kid. And like my mind sort of explodes. I'm like, wait a minute, you were doing X, Y, and Z up at the top. And they're like, your priorities just change. And it doesn't feel like a sacrifice maybe in the same way. Now you're sacrificing your sleep for sure. I've heard that complaint, but like every parent, and maybe it's just for mental health purposes, they say it's worth it. They're like, this little weird human, brings me joy. Now, disclaimer, I also work in child welfare, so maybe not every parent feels that, but I don't want to underestimate the power of like what hormones and evolution and biology do to make you not want to kill that child and instead like live off of your body and live off of your pocketbook and take away your sex life and take away your sleep. Like there's got to be something evolutionarily that makes us keep doing this. I'm open to being Johnny's mom. Who's Lauren? My next intro, next time I'm on a podcast. Hi, I'm Lauren. I'm Johnny's mom.
Exactly.
Sally's mom. And then everything else is just really secondary. So.
Now, unpopular opinion, but I don't think that women can have it all.
Agreed.
I don't think that you can be the top at work and then be the best mom. And like, I think there is a choice that has to be made when it comes down to it. Like you were saying, you have friends that, were really on top of it career-wise and were really killing it. And then all of a sudden said, I'm not really into that anymore. I think you sort of have to choose. Do you guys agree with that?
Yeah, I don't think you can do it all, but I think all changes. Like your definition of what all is changes once you have children. I don't have children now, but it's starting to change. Like for me, all isn't working around the clock and climbing that corporate ladder. It's about like, is this bringing me joy? If it's not, bye, Felicia. Like,
isn't it? I'm gonna misquote right here, so we'll fact check. But didn't RBG say something like you can have it all, just not at the same time?
That's what I was gonna
Mm.
say,
And
yeah.
that really resonated with me. Kind of like, all right, this stage in my life is partnership and work. Whereas my next, or actually right now it's kind of like family, like my parents, and and partnership. Whereas maybe the next stage is kids and work, and the stage after that is being empty nesters and relearning my partner, or something like that. But I'm open to that at different stages, something's taken a back seat, and you just have to respect that.
For guys too, I would hope.
No, that's not
maybe
true.
not. Oh, is it not true? Okay.
I think men can have it all.
Men can have it all.
You think so? Really?
Yeah.
Yes. They can go to work, they can be a CEO, they can have a wife at home who literally lives to raise their children and like check in on them and see how they're doing emotionally and mentally at work. They can have a great sex life and have sex when they feel like it, when they're available. They can have a job that travels. They can have kids that are well raised and coming up fine and in the best schools and like all the things. And they can have a friend life when they like, yes, men can have it all.
I just think even if a man is accelerating his career and has a lovely home life, there's still a balance that he has to strike in terms of showing up for his children. And that's hard too. And sometimes you have to sacrifice your career to show up for your children or vice versa, at least if you're wanting to be present for your children.
But don't you think showing up for a man looks different than showing up for a woman as a mother?
Absolutely.
So I think showing up for a man could be, I came to your baseball game this week once. Showing up for a mom is like, I made every single meal. I put you to bed, so it's different showing up.
Yeah. I totally agree. Azella, you sparked something for me, which was all of us are somewhat type A and we're all high achievers. And one of the things for me in the egg freezing process was there are all sorts of numbers and stats that come at you. And as someone who had to do it twice, you can get easily caught up in what the numbers mean and what it might mean for you about your ability to have children. And one of the doctors that I saw was really wonderful at breaking it down to me and said, all these numbers are about your ability to extract eggs. It says nothing about your ability to carry children, your ability to have children naturally. And that was a really aha moment because the first time I went through this, I was like, what are all these like stats about? And like, why am I like not within average for my age? And it can do a little bit of like a mind trick on you if you let it. But I guess all that to say is that everyone is different, but there are a lot of numbers that come at you. And particularly if you're like an analytical person, it can do something to you.
That's real. The mental around that. And so at the end of the day, fertility clinics need to make money. So it is in their best interest to scare the shit out of you and tell you that you are geriatric at 35, that your eggs are drying up and all these things. A lot of the reports and like studies that they're talking about are based on like stuff that was done in like the 15 or 1600s with women whose life expectancies were in the 40s. And by the time they were in their 30s, yes, their eggs were dried up because they were going to die soon. But I just think that there is a fair amount of like angst around, did I get enough eggs, right? The reason why people go through more cycles is because they tell you that for every, I think, 7 eggs you get, it's likely that you can get 1 pregnancy out of it. And so you go into this thing thinking like, oh my God, I need to get multiples of 7. I need to get like as many 7 counts as I can. Otherwise, like this will all have been for naught. And so if you come out of there with anything less than say 14 or whatever, like eggs that are mature, because they give you a number that they can extract, then they give you a number that were mature and healthy, which is less than the number that they extracted usually. And then they say that we can freeze these, but out of those, like X number are going to get to an embryo, X number are going to mature, X number are going to actually turn into something you can use. And so there is a lot of just like fear that maybe they mean to, maybe they don't mean to, that gets instilled in you about like, if I don't hit the right numbers, like my worth is less, or like I'm not as feminine as other women because I didn't get as many eggs to come out of this. So-and-so did it once and they got a bunch of eggs and I had to do it. I know I have one friend that did it 6 times because she found out that she was premenopausal when she went in to try and find out about her eggs at like 30 something, like early 30s. And so like it does a mind trick on you with society telling you that you are only good if you're a mother or if you can bring people into this world that is where your worth lies. And if you can't, or you don't want to, there's something wrong with you. And you go into egg freezing and they tell you, oh, you only got 5 eggs. And you're like, oh my God, am I not a woman? Am I not as much of a woman as other people? So like, it's really, there's a lot of mental and emotional that goes into this, even for someone that like doesn't really want the kids that badly. I can't imagine what this is like for people that desperately, like really, really, really want kids.
Yeah.
That's really interesting, Azella, that you went into this process not necessarily wanting kids, but that it still gave you those same emotions of maybe not feeling enough or feeling like you have to measure up to a certain number or what the average of women is at your age. But it's just funny how like mentally it comes down to questioning your womanhood and whether you are woman enough.
Mm-hmm.
Very much so. I think I really tried to manage my expectations because I knew how challenging it had been for folks. And then you look at these numbers, and I ended up kind of having, I think, like an average experience for my age-ish, but I was definitely in a place of hoping that I'd have dozens of viable follicles and, you know, just the options at my fingertips, instead of what their reminder is that like, this declines with every waking day. Every time you wake up and it's a new day and you're one day older, you continue to decline.
And less viable.
Exactly. And you know, and everyone kept telling me, including my primary care doctor, they're like, oh, you're doing this at 34. Great. That's like right before, you know, you go off the precipice of
you said that and I'm like, oh God, I'm 30.
Well, and that's kind of how they made me feel. They're like 34, perfect age, because it's just right before, you know, everything comes crashing down. And so it wasn't exactly like, oh, this feels, you know, oh good. It was kind of like, you know, you're skating in right before everything's terrible. But the other thing that made me think of all of their kind of hedging is this is all still really new science. And to Nubia's point, they're not promising us like anything really. They're promising us that like they have this technique where they give you all these meds and you pay a lot of money and they extract these eggs, and they're, I think, kind of covering their asses around not being able to guarantee that this will turn into a baby at some point. And the technology has evolved so dramatically in the last like few years as this has gained popularity. Like the number of women who have frozen their eggs in the last few years is just skyrocketed. And in a positive way, the technology has been moving along really quickly to catch up, but it's still evolving. Like the people who freeze their eggs in 2021 are going to have a different process than those of us who did it last year, or just because there's going to be more information and stuff like that. So that's in some ways curious and interesting. And I don't know that that's assuring. And I mean, it's assuring for the future, I guess. But I was reminded of that like, they're like, we're not promising you anything because we're still figuring out what this is.
Only 30% of IVFs work. Like when they go to try and reinsert it back up into you to catch on after they've turned it into an embryo by fertilizing it with sperm. There's some crazy stat, like only 1 in 3 ever actually like get there. And so I'm just like,
so the numbers just dwindle and dwindle from the start of the process to the actual baby. It's like the chances become lower and lower as the process goes on, is what it seems.
Yeah. I think so. I was sort of told that like 10 eggs, you know, 10 frozen eggs means about 8 will survive freezing, 5 will survive fertilization, you know, and then maybe like they'll put 3 in you at a time and 1 will connect.
Or 3 will connect and then you'll have triple.
Like
that's the thing. Like they don't know. They really don't know. They really don't know.
It's an insurance policy, but even that's not guaranteed. So I actually learned something that I don't think a lot of people who haven't been through this process know. This came from a conversation that I had with you, Nubia. We were talking about just you going through it and the emotions that you were going through. And just casually, I was like, well, how many eggs did you have? And I didn't even think about it. And you said, I'm fine with it, but that's not something that you should really ask people. After we got off the phone, it bothered me the entire day. Like I thought about it and I was just like, she's right. Like, why am I all in her uterus like that? Like I would feel offended. You know what I'm saying? Like I would feel offended if somebody asked me certain things about my reproductive health. Like if somebody was like, so how was your last PAP? I'd be like, what? Like it was something that I didn't even think about how invasive of a question it was until you gave me that feedback. And I was like, yeah, this is probably a really emotionally trying process for her. And no, she probably doesn't want to be like, yeah, it was this many at this time. Like, come on. And so I appreciated you giving me that feedback, because as somebody who hasn't been through this process, I didn't think about how many emotions were tied to that number. And now that I'm hearing you guys talk about the process and how your emotions go up and down with whatever that number is, and these numbers matter and can really get to you, like, I'm really glad that you shared that with me.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I will say, like, everyone is different, right? And I have a lower ovarian reserve, and so I had to do this twice to get to the number that I feel comfortable with. So I have a different perspective than someone else who did this, and it was like easy breezy. I got 20 eggs, and I'm good. But it does feel like there's so much held in that number, and it somehow represents your womanhood in a weird way. And oddly enough, Tennesha, you're not the only person that asked. Lots of people ask.
Yeah.
Funny enough, the people that I thought were going to ask, like my mom and family, namely my mom, she was like, oh, what does a number mean? You just need one. Like, she just had such a different mindset about it. So that was really lovely. But it's very personal for me, at least. And I don't know about you guys, but it's hard when people ask and you feel embarrassed or concerned about the number.
I'm glad you brought up family. Like, how have your families reacted to this, you going through this process?
It was really interesting to get to have a conversation with my mom about her fertility, because there's a long questionnaire when you're applying, and it involves things like, when did your mother go through menopause? And so it was kind of a cool opportunity to shock my Chinese American mother and be like, Mom, talk to me about menopause. How many pregnancies have you had? Really? How many pregnancies have you had? So there was a fun opportunity there, but that's one thing that stands out for me. And I think she was just generally supportive too. She also drove me to my procedure and picked me up, because since they put you under, she picked me up. So she was supportive. And then the other funny anecdote was, because at the time, again, I was doing this on my own. They ask you, if you die, who your eggs go to. And my default person who's gotten everything is my brother. And so, he is my life, my life insurance beneficiary. He's my like everything. And so I got to tell him that he gets my eggs. He was like, what am I supposed to do?
He's like, that is a really interesting point, because they do ask you, like, are you okay with them going to science for research? Are you okay with other people? Like, if you don't pay your bill for storage, they become property of the fertility center. And at that point, you have no like rights over them. And so if they decide that they are going to sell your eggs to people that wanted eggs but couldn't get eggs, it is within their right to do so. And so you have to pay for storage every year that you have eggs at the fertility center. And if you don't pay, the eggs become theirs. It's not crazy, but like, it's something that I didn't realize. I thought once you just got them froze, they were just froze. Go team. I was like, no, it costs money to store these. But like, it was interesting thinking about like, am I okay with my eggs going to research like Henrietta Lacks? Am I okay with like, you guys taking them and giving them to strangers that I don't know because they really want kids and my eggs were viable? Like, it's an interesting thing to have to think about as you're filling out paperwork.
So what piece of advice would you guys give to somebody that's thinking about undergoing this process?
Well, two pieces. One is that know that everyone is different and everybody's body is going to respond to the medication differently. And you've got a different ovarian reserve, and, your body will be different than the next person's. And in that, to just have a little bit of compassion for yourself and know that like, whatever comes from this is good, because you're setting yourself up for something that you want. And that's really brave and courageous. And not everyone has the ability to do so. I'm so fortunate that I had a company that was able to do it. But I also am really inspired by the way that Lauren was able to make it happen. And so know that everyone is different, and then be compassionate and forgiving to yourself.
I would say if you're open to it, don't be afraid to kind of reach out to community. I get such a return on that. Not only having wonderful friends who are willing to talk to me about the process before I was even doing it, because I had people who gave me roadmaps, but then I actually ended up like hustling most of my meds Crowdsourcing. Crowdsourcing. Yeah, I crowdsourced a lot of my meds. And it actually, I was inspired by a friend of mine who had gone through the process. And she told me that she'd been part of this queer exchange where they like were supporting other queer folks who were going through the egg freezing process. And they would share, all the medications, everybody gets them in different doses, but they're the same medications and they have very defined expiration dates, so if it's good or if it's not good. And so her Facebook group would share leftover medications with different folks in that community. And so I was like, this is what I'm going to do. And I did. And I reached out to all my friends who I knew had gone through it. I reached out to like a listserv of strangers and was like, hi, I'm Lauren. Do you have extra drugs? Can I have them? And it saved me thousands and thousands of dollars. And I got to connect with probably at least like 10 other women who I might not have already connected with to like have them share something with me. And then to get to hear their story about what they went through and for them to get to kind of provide some mentorship and what else are they going to do with a gonal pen
Right.
in their fridge or whatever. And so that would be my advice is like if you're feeling brave enough for it, and you don't have to exchange what's not personal, but ask for support. There are those of us who are willing to share our stories, and I would be willing to chat with anybody who wants to talk about it. And see if you can get free meds. And if you have some left over, try to pay it forward.
Right.
But
I would say like, don't believe everything you read on the internet.
Yeah.
I freaked myself out a lot by going into rabbit holes of like the worst possible outcomes of all the things that could possibly happen on egg freezing. And if there's a possibility for you to talk to people that have been through it, I would very much strongly just say like, see if you can find people who have done it as opposed to like going on the internet. And two, I would say just like to Nubia's point, you can do this, money aside, like if you can find the funds to make this happen, like it's not something that is insurmountable from an execution standpoint for a woman. The shots are scary the first time, the second time, and then you literally are just like pop, 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 and you're out for the evening. Like it really is not something that you can't do. Like you have it in you to do it.
Is there anything that you guys wish that you would have done differently in the process?
I did not do a good job of reaching out to community when I went through it myself. I was very single at the time, and I had asked a guy friend of mine who wasn't working at the time to come and pick me up afterwards, because they technically aren't allowed to let you go by yourself after you've been under anesthesia. And for his own reasons, like he didn't make it. He just like fell asleep and never answered the phone when I called afterwards. And so instead of, I don't know, taking an Uber, calling another friend, like to come pick me up, I literally, because I'm crazy, didn't want to spend the money for some reason. I don't know if I was in my right mind, but I went outside and I caught the bus to the BART.
Excuse me? Azella.
I'm crazy.
I'm so mad at you right now.
The BART, and I took the BART home and walked home to prove to myself that I'm a strong woman and I
don't need nobody.
Stupid, not bright. And talking to friends afterwards, they were like, why didn't you call? I was like, you guys were at work. It was 10 o'clock in the morning. Like, I didn't want to like bug people. I wish I would have just like asked for help when I needed help. I wish I would have just reached out. And it's a very vulnerable time where you're doing this really personal thing. And so it's hard to put yourself out there all in a space like that. And so I wish I would have done that differently. So yeah.
She was like, I don't need nobody.
Right. I was like, I can take care of myself. And I came out and I didn't feel loopy and I didn't feel like I had been under anesthesia. So I was like, I'm fine. It's not it's not a big deal. I wanted to minimize it as much as possible, I think, in my own brain. In hindsight, might not have been the smartest thing, but
Azella, I would have taken you in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
I know. And any of my friends, if I called them with that story, would have left work and come to get me. It's just one of those things where I'm like, ask for help. Like Lauren asked for help and she saved thousands of dollars and like learned stories and got information that was helpful. Like I would encourage people to ask for help.
I probably would have sought out more community as well. I'd only at the time known a few people who had done it once, and I I felt very embarrassed about having to do it again, where in reality, it's actually pretty common for women over 35 to have to go through multiple cycles. And I just would have sought out more community of women who had done that. It just helps to be around other people who have gone through it multiple times. I also probably would have been more honest with people about how I was feeling immediately afterwards. I think I undermined how much the entire process just was. Not that it's super taxing on your body, but emotionally, it felt like a lot to have gone through that and then just to go to work the next day and like be normal.
This can be really private, and everyone is entitled to their own privacy around their body, around what they share. I hope there's not shame as opposed to privacy, right? Yeah. You don't have to share all of your business, but I hope you're not holding on because you feel like it's something embarrassing instead of feeling free to trust in somebody else who's happy to talk through with you. And the more we talk about things like this, the more we get to normalize it and the more we get to share the diversity of experiences.
And that's why I think it's so important to talk about this and to bring it up, because chances are there is somebody close to you or somebody that you know that is also going through it, but they feel like they can't talk about it, or like this isn't something you share. So like, I'm not going to come into work and say, I'm going through something, I need some time. So I'm really thankful that you guys came on and talked about this and were so honest about your emotions and feelings during the process and, you know, your hopes about the future. I would love it if you guys share your Instagrams in case there is somebody going through that, you know, needs support or somebody to lean on while they're going through it.
My Instagram is NubiD. It's NUBI_D.
At Azella B, AZELLAP.
My Instagram is LBB2015. And I'd be more than happy to talk to anybody who's considering this or going through it.
And I just want to thank you, Tennesha, because it takes a really incredible person to cultivate this type of conversation and make space for it. And as your friend, I've seen you grow so much in this podcast, and you're pursuing your passions, inspire me to want to do more. And I'm just so honored that you even have us on here.
Aw, thank you. And thank you guys so much again for joining today. And thank you, my lovely listeners, for tuning in today. Please reach out to me at Tennesha Wood on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and let me know what you think of today's show. And until next time, wish me love. Hello again, my lovely listeners. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of DRL. If you like the show, be sure to go on iTunes and leave a rating and also write a review. And don't forget to share with your friends and tell them all about DRL. Thank you so much for supporting.